Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on going from lagging to leading. How can enterprises close the AI gap in 2025? Now, this is a panel webinar, and I've enlisted some great names that I can pose my questions to, and I'm really excited to get started, but let's give some chance to our presenters to introduce themselves, a little bit about their background. I'm your host, Kaz Hassan. I work for Unily, and I look after our community and partner marketing. I also worked on some of our research that we'll reference throughout this webinar, and I will pass over to the first name I see on that screen, so Frank.
Hi, thanks Kaz, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm Frank Dias, 15 odd years in global internal comms in many different industries. However, last 2 years has been sort of learning, experimenting with AI and sort of integrating it into my different ways of working and workflows. I'm currently the comms lead business partner for AI adoption and integration program at the global HR and recruitment company called Adecco Group. And I'm an AI optimist, and I'm looking forward to this call.
Nice. I've interacted with Frank over the years through LinkedIn, a great thought leader in the industry. And when I saw him move to Adecco Group, one of Uni's customers, was super excited to get him on this panel. Handing over to another one of our partners now, Nick from Microsoft. Hi, Nick.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon even, sorry.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Microsoft.
Yeah, hi, it's so great to be with you all today. I lead our channel ecosystem for Microsoft here in the UK, and our mission is to help our partners transform and create really incredible businesses out of the AI opportunity. And actually prior to this, I launched Microsoft 365 Copilot into the UK market. So it was very much at the heart of that over the prior 2 years, and lots of stories I can share. 18 years at Microsoft, looking forward to today.
For sure, no doubt. Copilot will be coming up in these questions, so looking forward to tapping into some of that experience. And next, on to some homegrown talent from Unily. I'm joined by Hannah Unsworth. Hello, Hannah.
Hi, Kaz.
Hi, let us know a little bit about you and your role at Unily.
So I've been at Unily for about 11 years now, so seeing the growth of the product and kind of adding more and more enterprise customers into our customer base. I'm now head of product, previously been in lots of consulting and professional services roles, getting customers up and running with Unily, and now responsible for all of our new exciting innovation. Obviously, a lot of that is going to be AI infused, AI driven. So here to kind of hear what Frank and Nick have to say, but also kind of give you a bit of insight into how we innovate, thinking about AI at the forefront of that.
Excellent. So all-star panel that personally picked. I'm really excited to pose different types of questions when it comes to AI adoption. And specifically, I know a lot of you are looking at how you can get into your organization and really make an impact to close that gap. So I'm really looking forward to asking my questions. One thing to note as well, from this point onwards, you can start putting your questions in the Q&A segment of this webinar window. So I have reserved a portion of this webinar at the end to make sure that I can ask some of your hard-hitting questions to our panelists. You can also, if nothing comes to mind, you can also vote on other people's questions. So if you see one that takes your fancy, then you can vote on other people's questions, and I'll go by the most popular questions as well to pose to my panelists. So let's get started. I've got a couple of slides for you. So you've heard the name Unily now. We are an employee experience platform. We power organizational velocity for some of the world's most iconic and complex brands, like Adecco Group, who are on the call, as well as some of those other iconic logos that you see there, like CVS Health and Johnson & Johnson. Over 5 million employees use the platform. So lots of interactions with different employees, and we try to use some of those interactions to inform our thought leadership as well, which you'll kind of hear through some of Hannah's answers here. We are the only intranet employee experience platform that's listed as a leader across all 3 big analyst report. That's Gartner, Forrester, and IDC. So it puts us in a unique position in our industry. And that kind of forms my introduction. Just for your awareness, I want to put a bit of structure around our questions. So we're going to start quite broad, talking about the current state of enterprise AI, then going into some of the more the policy side of it. How can we really implement AI, make some actions? Then thinking about the workforce, specifically about employees, what employees are doing, how they're thinking, feeling about AI, and what we can do there. And then thinking about more strategically, how do we weave a new workplace with AI infused into it, before going on to the audience Q&A. So For those of you that are interested, some of the questions I've written have been based on the latest research findings that we've put together. So this is specifically on large enterprises. So we asked large enterprise employees what they're thinking, feeling about AI, and there were three main headlines around that. The first big one is around there's been a bit of a false start for enterprise AI. So a lot of talk and discussion about it, which I'm sure you've all been a part of or experienced, which is of course why you're here today, but not as much action as we would have liked to have hoped. So I'm hoping that we can find some action and some tips and tricks to overcome that barrier. The second big headline is around the workforce. Specifically, the workforce is dividing. There's been a bit of a schism in the workforce, as it were. We've got one segment kind of racing away, trying AI right away, probably like myself and some of the panelists on this call, kind of researching what's the latest and greatest innovation, how can I use that to support my role, and sometimes outside of work too. Meanwhile, you've got another segment of the workforce who haven't used AI at work at all, and sometimes can be quite resistant to it, or specifically want to be told when and where and how to use it. So I'll be asking our panelists about that as well. And lastly, the big headline was around weaving a new workplace, which is that employees don't just want loads of new bolted on AI tools. We know there's been a lot of digital tool shopping over the past few years, especially off the back of the pandemic. But our employees want us to think about how do we strategically design AI into our existing workflow using some of the tools we know and love already. So those are the three big headlines, and I've got some questions off the back of those. But I just want to kick us off, maybe shape some of the questions around how do you think and feel about enterprise adoption in your organization? So you can also, if you want to download the research report, that's there now. You can click on that, or you can download it after as well. It's on the uni.com website. But I do have a question for you, which is a quick poll just to get a quick sense check on how you're thinking and feeling. Do you think in your organization, AI adoption is you're moving too fast? Do you think you're perhaps moving at the right pace? Or do you think you're maybe moving too slow? So hopefully you see a little modal or pop up on your screen. You've got three options. When it comes to AI adoption, do you think your organization is moving too fast, the right pace, or moving too slow? Okay, so I can see some of the answers coming in now. Okay. So we got maybe about 40% of you moving at the right pace. Almost about 50% say moving too slow. Some say moving too fast as well, just a smaller percentage. Interesting. So about 50% say that. So looking like the top answer is moving too slow, followed by moving at the right pace, followed by moving too fast. I think good to see that there's actually different answers there, and it goes to show different organizations are working at different paces. But I think one thing to take away from that is that there isn't maybe a one size fits all. I think especially when it comes to the enterprise space, we need to take a quite considered view, and moving too slow is obviously a risk for our organization because we've got competitors that are moving faster, are able to outcompete us using AI better. That's a risk. But also you don't want to move too fast, because moving too fast can pose its risks as well. You want to consider, are we using the right tools? So thank you so much for getting involved. I am now going to switch the slides off, and you can see all of our faces now. I'm going to go into the question part of this webinar. So wanted to start thinking about the current state of enterprise AI. And I want to start with you, Frank. We've set some context, we've seen some of the research there, is that actually enterprises aren't moving that fast when it comes to AI adoption and things like that. What do you think is holding up enterprise AI adoption?
Yeah, that it's a very important question, really. There isn't a sort of blueprint for this type of technology. The reality is it's complicated. Outside of an org where you've got all the tech big companies, it all seems carefree. It's just plug and play. But inside an org, especially if you're a complicated organization, there's more to it than just plug and play if you want to do it correctly, carefully, and considerately. You've got things like regulation, we've got things like data and our tech stack. We've got responsible AI, and there's links to ethics. You've then got massive costs, which are very new to many businesses' worlds in terms of how much does AI actually cost to do it well. You've then got all this work to do discovery about your user cases, of which we've not really touched before in this sort of level. And also, who do you bring together? Who do you collaborate with? And then it means that you've got to reprioritize all your plans and your strategies to try and shoehorn this in. So there's a lot of experimentation and a lot of needing to learn fast and upskilling training, as well as trying to look at that sort of in-house expertise and bringing outside in. So there's a whole gamut of reasons why I think things are being held up very much, particularly if you want to do it thoughtfully, meaningfully, properly, carefully, all the lees,
Yeah.
which could impact your cost. You
Yeah.
don't want to waste money. You've got your reputation at hand, particularly if there's misuse of AI. So yeah, there's so much, and the key to it is we're dealing with people, and in particular, if you're not designing it in a human-centric way, then you're going to cause more problems in the long run in terms of how you're going about it.
For sure, and I think it's. I think the reality is it's quite complicated there, and I think there are some of those barriers that we want to overcome. And the technology side of it is that we've had other technology innovations that we've looked to adopt, and some of them have been kind of around like people have been quite excited about them, and I've seen some of that excitement come through when it comes to AI as well. Been to a fair few conferences recently, and there's a lot of conversation, the conversation, the presentations, the technology, lots of discussion and excitement around AI. But how do we turn that excitement and awareness? Everyone seems to be discussing it. Nick, how do we turn that excitement of AI into actual business opportunity?
Yeah, I'm really glad, Kaz, you used the word excitement, because I also hear the word hype used quite a lot. And actually, if you look at the definition of hype, it would suggest a flash in the pan moment, something that's here one day and gone tomorrow. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We are in the next wave of the technological innovation curve, and AI is here to stay. It's going to change the way our lives and our businesses operate on a daily basis. And so embracing it and embracing that excitement is really important. Now, I would say that there are some ways in which you can translate that excitement into business value. And especially if I just reflect on my journey over the last sort of 2 years, having met with a lot of our customers here in the UK, I'd say 2023 and part of 2024 was very much the early days of this, what many customers would call the AI sort of excitement, but really it was about generative AI excitement. It was when ChatGPT came onto the scene, and we were often being asked to go into board meetings all around the UK and answer some of the basic questions. What is this technology? How should we be thinking about it? Many customers have moved on since then. Certainly in the last 6 months, I'd say we're kind of in season 2, if you like, of AI. And the conversation is becoming much more business centric, and you can largely boil down the conversations we're having into 4 buckets. Number one, how can I improve and enhance and enrich the experience for my employees? How can technology take away the mundane burden of their day to day? And look, like I said earlier, I launched Copilot. That is a good example of that technology in action, right? It's not the only, but it's a good example of it in that it's designed as an assistant to you. It's on 24/7, and it's there to take a lot of the day-to-day burden out of your existence and your tasks. So that's a good example there. The second one is, how can you improve your own customer experience? How can customers interact with your brand in a different way? How could they be serviced in a different way? We're seeing a lot of our customers using it for that exact reason. Call centers, great place where AI can help customer service agents to improve the NPS score, improve the response rate, improve the number of claims or incidents that they work through, as an example. Then business process, I think this is where the rubber hits the road. Like, what are some of the digitized business processes that could be enhanced with AI, but also even increasingly, what are some of the analog processes that have existed for a long, long time in big companies all around the world that could suddenly be really enhanced through a digitization and with an AI overlay? And then the final thing we often talk about is, are there some things you just simply couldn't have done without AI that you could do now that can change the trajectory and bend the curve on the innovation that you're landing in your organization? And I'll give you one very simple example of that. right now driving around the streets of London are fully autonomous driving cars created by a company called Wave. Those cars and the brains that are driving the cars is based on our AI technology stack in the back end. That wouldn't have been possible a few years ago. And so there are some great examples there in action as well. So I think they're kind of they're the 4 areas we discuss. And more often than not, actually, we tend to find that the business process one is the one that comes up because it's actually a great way to think about fixing business problems and then coming to the technology as the way to solve it, as opposed to starting with the technology.
It seems like there's quite a lot of opportunity, and so I guess an element of that is trying to, as you say, like focus correctly, find where the right opportunities and the right value lies for you. You mentioned a customer experience there as well. I think with Hannah, we've got you on the call. Obviously, you're focused on the employee experience side of that. I'm intrigued to know, I think there's a lot of conversations that sometimes can be shiny object syndrome. And I looked at some of these use cases and think maybe this isn't the best value add, and maybe they haven't calculated the ROI, but it might look the coolest. From your perspective, Hannah, from a product perspective, how have we prioritized what to build, right, when it comes to the Unity product, and why?
Yeah, and I think it's important when Nick was saying around business process and improving, enriching, and making sure that those kind of key bits are probably our biggest wheelhouse, and making sure that we're kind of AI enabling as much of the end user kind of employee and that's consuming Unity as possible. So not kind of jumping in on the kind of small niche use cases and the specific applications of AI, but actually where we can make the biggest impact for those end users. So whether it's leveraging translation services, video captioning, auto tagging, where we can actually leverage their day-to-day job and improve it through infusing AI. But also making sure that that is seamless and it is complementing what they're already doing. So we don't want to see an kind of AI flag or a shiny button, but actually we want it just to be behaving and integrating with their activities and their productivity tools that they were already planning on using, and actually it's making them faster. And then the other side of that is how can we complement our content creators as well, make them more productive, make them make more kind of engaging, beautiful content with less effort that actually reaches those end users better. And that's kind of where we're coming at it from, is where can we introduce innovation to drive kind of through to season 3 and season 4 of AI. And so what kind of where people are immature in thinking or their governance is not quite caught up, can we do some of that thinking for them and introduce capabilities that, you know what, it's a bit of a no-brainer, let's enable that for our end users because it's going to improve their day-to-day job.
So you mentioned the word governance there, and I think speaking about AI, there's of course lots of excitement and opportunity, but especially when it comes to the enterprise space, you want to be wise and make strong decisions. I know you spoke a little bit about like a governed AI approach. Can you explain what does that actually mean?
It's me.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess we are working with a lot of different enterprises at different scale with different complexities, as Frank was alluding to. And what we need to do as a kind of vendor and a product provider is to account for all of that. So our kind of first base is to make sure that everything we do is secure, people data, customer data is safe. It's going through a lot of rigor in terms of if we're integrating, if we're building our own services. But also one of our key kind of principles in how we design is making sure that we are highly configurable. So you guys can turn it on, all features in once, or you can actually at a granular level enable it or disable it and have full control. So that means that for customers that are kind of super risk averse, they might want to disable all AI capabilities altogether. Or for those that are dipping their toe and going a little bit faster, they may want to enable it on certain capabilities. So when we're talking about creating content, they might enable it on the kind of less impactful articles about kind of the summer party, but actually the CEO news or the investment publication is actually fully controlled and it's human management only. So we try to bring kind of a smart angle to it so that configurability is in the hands of our customers and our admins essentially.
Interesting. So I think that governed AI approach makes sense, especially when it comes to an enterprise level. And I think even Nick, I'm sure you've experienced, even in some of your conversations, you'll probably experience organizations sometimes differing country by country, sometimes by industry, sometimes making a more risk averse, others trying to innovate. I want to think about a little bit about like how actually are there any trends? Is there a right answer there? Like, would you advocate for one or the other, Nick?
I think honestly, it depends what it is you're trying to do. I think first things first is having really clear principles as an organization as to how you're going to use AI is absolutely critical. You know, we at Microsoft have been working on our responsible AI principles back since 2016, and they're published on our website if you're interested in them. Many customers enjoy reading them and often think they're a good starting point for their own conversations, but you equally might have your own set of ways of guiding and governing the way you think about AI. Then I would almost boil the conversation then into two different categories. If you're buying the technology, then actually the conversation should be with the vendor of that technology as to how they have responsibly implemented these AI models into their tech. So Hannah just gave some great examples there of being able to offer up the customer controls to sort of think about how that technology works, but also what are some of the things further up the tree in the development cycle that you've done. You know, there are certain things that you will be defining in these large language models, for example, at a meta level, as to how those models behave when they're implemented into the end user's arms and eyes. So knowing how the vendor is thinking about it is really critical. The second scenario is you go build it yourself, right? You go to something like a foundry. Azure has over 1,800 models now in our foundry, small language models, large language models from lots of different providers, and you start building your own capability, in which case then now you're very much responsible for thinking about how you fine tune those models and what sort of behaviors do those models give the end user when they start interacting with them. So that really does require you to have a strong set of principles about how you would then design the technology with that in mind. So I think knowing your principles and then knowing the scenario in which you're bringing the technology to life really does dictate as to how you act and behave with the governance.
So it seems like organizations have to put the work and the thinking in. Frank, I want to come to you next. And one of the headlines we spoke about was maybe the lack of policy from an organization perspective. For people watching this, where does an organization even start when it comes to an AI policy? And what are you thinking about at Adecco Group when it comes to that too?
Well, with regards to policy, it's just like all the other policies out there. It really is down to collaboration, bringing the right people around the table to actually talk it out loud. You definitely need a steer in terms of the technology side and the technology voice in terms of part of that lead. But then HR's at the table, as well as communications, hopefully, with regards to talking about the people side of things. So really it is around bringing the right people together, really tie it to your values and purpose as your North Star in all of this, and in particular, your strategy and your priorities. So don't just start from a blank sheet with the policy, really ground it in terms of what all your other values mean as your starting point and your base, and then really do your research. And you can use all these AI deep researchers now to do that research.
Yes.
There's plenty of templates out there for anyone who hasn't developed an AI policy. The good news is there's 2 years since ChatGPT went, and like Nick was saying, other companies have been working on their AI policies for quite some time. So there's plenty of help and advice out there already. And bring in some external expertise as well is what I'd say as well, because you might not have all the right knowledge from just an internal point of view. But for me, the key core is really starting with humans and people and the design. Mm-hmm. Link it to what your business does and really link it to your strategy based on the people, behaviors, mindset that you want, and keep it super simple, super clear. Don't really sort of reinvent the wheel here. Make your tone friendly and optimistic, really, because this is an important document that you want everyone to be connecting to. So, and also the flip side of that is really ground it in security and safety. Yeah, and from an Adecco Group, because you did ask,
yes.
We have our own responsible AI usage principles, and there's just 5 of them based on being ethical, transparent, human-centric, legal, and using it safely. And we have a committee structure so that anything that we're doing, working with AI, always goes through our responsible AI committee. So that keeps us grounded and it's linked to our AI governance.
And you kind of Bob in the chat saying that's really great advice, and I think it seems like that probably is the almost the most important part, right? Because I think we spoke earlier about moving too fast, too slow. I think the thing you need to move fast on is clarity, communication, policy. Actually, in the research that we did, one of the big findings that came out was around shadow AI usage, and employees often, I think 11% of employees knowingly enter sensitive company information into unsanctioned AI tools, with a further 9% saying they're not sure if they have. So that's obviously a big, well, a big risk for many different reasons. Nick, thinking about shadow AI usage, aside from clarity and communication, which Frank mentioned, what else can an organization do to reduce shadow AI usage?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, right? That every IT leader at least is thinking about right now, and has been for the last couple of years. Turning it off or trying to restrict access, we know doesn't work, and people always find a way. In our work trends index report, which we do once a year into usage of technologies in the workplace, and more recently it's been specifically on AI, we saw that 80% of people have used some form of generative AI tool in the workplace. And that is a trend that has increased rapidly. Now that result, by the way, was from a few months ago, so I think it will be much higher next time we do the survey. And so if you're not providing it, then people will find a way to use it, right? And there are risks associated to that. And I think the point you just make, Kaz, is the right one. It's sensitive company information that's being pasted into the open web. Very rarely do end users read the end user policies and T's and C's of these tools, and there is a real risk that sensitive company information could be subsequently leaked. So I think it's incumbent upon organizations to provide a enterprise grade tool set that is governed by security and compliance policies, and designed so that anything you do put into those tools stays in the company environment and keeps things that are sensitive with that in mind. Just as an aside, and this might sound like a bit of a sales pitch here, but I promise it's not. We have a large number of Microsoft 365 users in the UK. For any company that has already signed up to and is using M365, like I say, is pretty prevalent in the UK market. You've already got the value built in of what we call Copilot Chat. That is a chat capability which you can turn on in a second from your admin portal. It is governed by enterprise grade data protection, and it uses all the same OpenAI technologies in the back end. So you can have a very natural chat type experience. You can turn on web if you want to, but you've got the confidence that any sensitive information you place into there is not saved anywhere. It's not used to train the language model. The data doesn't leave your tenant and so forth. So there's a simple solution there as one example. And like I say, many organizations here on the call today will likely have already got that in their subscription and may not even realize they've got it as an option.
Definitely. And so go on, Hannah.
No, I was just going to say, Nick, I think kind of looking internally at our own company and how we have the same challenges around shadow IT. But I think when you're launching things like Copilot or other tooling, it's actually kind of wrapping your arms around those employees and guiding them. So not just saying, oh, don't use that, use this, but actually running a pilot, maybe engaging the people that are most actively using the other tools and are most kind of eager and keen about AI tools. Get them on board and help understand their use cases and make sure they understand how the tools you've provided map to them. And we're doing something similar internally to make sure that we can kind of move away from the rogue pasting into ChatGPT. And I think it's important to make sure that you meet people where they are and not just say use this tool, because otherwise they'll just use their phone, off network to do it. So
for sure.
Sorry, Kaz, Karen.
No, it's fine. So Frank, actually, I want to come to you on that point, because that's a really good point around communication. We've spoken about the policy and the governance, which is super important. We spoke about the technology and having the right technology. That's really important. Of course, the next big part of that, as Hannah started to speak about, is around the employees. How do we effectively communicate about AI and avoid it becoming another checkbox communication campaign? Like, check, we've spoken about AI, on to the next thing.
Yes, it's for me, it's very much in its simplicity a change approach to doing it. So it's a communicator, that's the hat I put on. However, it's so much more complicated than all the other sort of tech things that we've seen from digital transformation in cloud to what we have today with AI, and it cuts across the entire audience, the entire business, and you've got so many different tiers of people, and that you've alluded to, some who are fast movers, others who are slow, people who are just not into it. You've also got potentially people who disagree with it completely, and you're trying to communicate with this entire audience, and you're trying to ground it, which is why it's so important to have an AI strategy in place, which at least gives you the direction of travel that the business has agreed that they want to move in. And then it's really about placing it in terms of keeping the communication simple. This is an AI journey that we're all on. Not only is it impacting you in your work environment, this is impacting all of us in our personal space as well. It's impacting society because there's going to be so much more conversations to come out that actually we as communicators with our communication hat on have an element of a duty of care to how we do this messaging. And I don't think many people talk too much about the depth of the storytelling that we need to do, particularly if we want to do it meaningfully, the Lees again, carefully, and with care and compassion, particularly if you're making sure that everything is human centric. And that, for me, that's the key to it. The way I'm trying to build it at the Adecco Group is very much a journey storytelling approach, and really trying to gather as many voices and feedback. We're starting with our leadership group at the moment to get that alignment, to get their feedback to what we're planning, so that we can just get that alignment at the highest level first. We've been doing AI for the last sort of 2 years, but now we're really seeing our maturity in terms of what's next. So yeah, we're trying to get our leadership cohort really aligned first is our key bit, and then working down from there. And then there's so many pillars after that in terms of how do you cut it.
For sure. And so leadership alignment. Actually, when we first discussed the report, Frank, and some of the key findings from it, one of the things you brought up to me, which I haven't even considered, was around the impact of a divided workforce, i.e., those employees that are maybe using it right away on an AI speed setting, and those not. You kind of brought up that there was a potential impact of that. What is that impact potentially?
Well, we talk about accessibility and inclusiveness. You end up creating that 2-speed, and if you're not appreciative of that and you plan that into your communication storytelling and you help your leaders articulate that because they're made more aware because we call it out, then you are going to get a displacement in itself, just in terms of how you do the communication. Now, we know that's going to happen by default, so it's up to us to design it in a way whereby we at least bring it to the forefront. And just in terms of the whole term of adoption is highlighting that really, really greatly at the moment in terms of how do you move everyone together to at least just get a minimum standard of leveling up, just in terms of the basics. We saw it with GDPR as the closest thing in terms of trying to push people forward with regulation. But this is sort of at 2 fronts. You've got the regulation of the EU AI Act, if you're based in the EU, and you also have the inside within a business. So yeah, it's you really need to be conscious, which is why I come back to it. Design your communication as human-centric as possible.
There's a great question from Ashlyn that dives deeper into this topic. Nick, actually, you have a lot of different interactions with different types of organizations, different scales. If an organization is looking at their workforce and seeing this two-speed emerge, what strategies could help organizations trying to reduce that gap between these AI savvy employees versus those potentially left behind?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And in fact, we've been studying it with our own internal rollout of our own AI technologies to our people. And we took it very much as a science experiment within certain divisions, creating a control group and then those that are exposed to the technology. And so there's a bit of science behind the results, which is helpful. And what we learn is there are really two things that matter. Number one, that the leader engages and creates the permission and the environment for it to be used actively in the workplace, and that there's an effective communication strategy that's sitting around that. I think really that's what the point Frank was just making there. So using all the tools to effectively communicate as the leader, to encourage people to use it, to role model using it themselves, and giving people permission to use the technology in the workplace. That's number one. The second thing is getting hands-on with the technology together in person. Now, we call this concept a promptathon. We took the idea of a hackathon and changed it for the generative AI era, but this idea of coming together and building results or creating outcomes using the technology based on some real world day-to-day business problems. And actually, interestingly, that's now evolving from promptathons to what we're now calling agentathons or agentathons, because increasingly now these solutions are being built as agents. These are agents that are essentially going off and doing these tasks for you, or helping to automate certain tasks. So, but the meta point here is that getting hands-on together is really important, and a trick or a nuance when you do get together is find your power users, hug them, love them, and ask them to do you a favor, because more often than not, they're very passionate about their own stories and journeys. And if you can channel that energy to help others around the organization that haven't had that experience today, actually can be very powerful. So having a close-knit group of early adopters who you cherish, you support, you put on a pedestal and give them the opportunity to tell their story is very powerful.
Mm-hmm. And it's some of those stories actually that have inspired me. It's kind of like those conversations, the conversations around the office, speaking to other people in different types of roles to see how they're applying it, which has inspired me. And I think, Frank, you mentioned that storytelling element earlier, and I think that storytelling element is super important. I want to move on to some of the kind of designing the new workplace with AI, or infused with AI, not just bolted on. One of the key findings that shocked me from the research was that actually, though employees may be divided on certain parts of AI, one thing that they're quite united in is what AI should be used for. There's a finding that 56% of employees would use AI more if it was better integrated into their workflows. And 51% of employees wanting AI specifically to simplify the digital workplace. Hannah, how can organizations design their digital workplace to be simpler, not just adding loads of extra things onto it?
Yeah, I mean, kind of what I was saying a bit earlier, in that we want things to be familiar, but we want to boost them, give them a power up with AI, and not necessarily kind of rip it up and restart and it all be all new, or you just have one big box where you put prompts in. So we're using that as kind of a design principles we're going through to make sure that we're kind of cutting through the digital friction, reducing noise, but using AI to complement that. So an example may be we're looking at elevating our social communities capability at the moment. We're looking at how we can improve design, make it slick, simple, but actually infuse AI to complement that. So I have a community, but actually here it's auto recommending me. It's showing me what's trending around me. It's saying, did you miss this piece of knowledge that was hidden in a social comment? We've converted it to curated content for you. So all of this kind of standard behaviors that you would want to do and the tasks you want to undertake, actually making it simpler and reducing the number of actions from the human. It's not feeling like you're just throwing in AI on top of something and making it more confusing, but actually complementing. And the same with things like our Insight Center, which is kind of a bring your own agent capability. So you can search and it will aggregate content from around your ecosystem. So whether it is in a third-party tooling, or it's your task list, or you've got holiday to approve, actually having one central place where you can ask something, it will aggregate and then perform those tasks. So simpler in the hopefully it's a simpler process and user experience and flow, but actually not as simple behind the scenes, but hiding that from the end user and ultimately the content creator as well.
You're on mute, Kaz.
Great point, Anna. There's actually a point that I wanted to discuss that came out in the chat, which I didn't but didn't plan to ask. But one of the things that shocked me most about the research, and I got to be the geek that was looking at the individual answers. So I was looking at some of the free text answers, what people were putting in there, and the AI adopters, those that are using AI right away, were very descriptive about what they used AI for, and were very detailed about it as well, and some of the use cases. And what I noticed was that whilst they were passionate, the majority of them were personal productivity improvements. They weren't the big, meaningful, transformational AI stuff that people are often getting excited about, or I'm sure enterprise leaders are getting excited about. Frank, how do you think we start to make sure that our workforce aren't just thinking about personal productivity, but actually are thinking a bit more strategically and are using AI to the best of its capability?
It's a tricky question, actually, in terms of helping the employees to appreciate that. It really starts with the business, particularly those in the right positions, to really look at AI, particularly choosing and approving the tools and understanding those capabilities and limitations. Sorry, doorbell's going off. And really just trying to associate that to what the roles that people are doing, and making it a lot more about what's in it for me, and really laying it out with regards to the workflows. And so again, all this is down to maturity. The majority of businesses are really looking at the low hanging fruit stuff at the moment, and we're just trying to get the baseline ready. But that really sort of that next step, really, particularly to make it relevant and relatable to me, is linking it to the actual roles and the workflows. And this is where the business needs to land on the exact tools that they're letting people use. And with all the advances as well, like with reasoning models coming out, how do they interweave some of that? Because picking up your point around the more strategic, high value, golden egg stuff, that's where the reasoning models, I would say, come in a lot more. However, you need to be able to know what questions you need to ask to really leverage the outputs that are created. But really, it's around the storytelling linked to the people and their use of the tools and impact, I think, to just make it as relatable as possible. But again, maturity is the challenge here, because we don't really have a true measurement of what good looks like and what value looks like with regards to its use. So there's lots of gaps there, but if you can relate it to roles and workflows, then that makes it relatable.
Really great point on measurement there to think about, because it's not just about storming ahead in any direction for the sake of it. It's about storming ahead in the right direction to make an impact. So really great point. I guess if Nick actually spoke about season 2, we're in season 2 right now. If I'm an enterprise leader watching this, and I want to be prepared for season 3, what should I be doing to be prepared for season 3 of the AI landscape?
Yeah, look, I think started to mention it earlier. It starts with being very specific about the value you need to go create. What are the business problems that are being solved? We talked about that extensively during the call. But the point about agents is really starting to hot up now. Like, how can you take some of your business workflows? Hannah mentioned it, Frank's mentioned it. How can you take some of your business workflows? How can you either create an agent for yourself? Quite honestly, I've created tons of agents in the last few months that are helping me get some simple sort of task completion or information retrieval done. But more importantly, other things you can do for the organization or for teams within the organization that either semi-automate or fully automate processes. And I'll give you an example. We've been working with Pets at Home, and they've built a really impressive semi-autonomous agent that is helping them with their fraud department. So they get some people calling up and saying, hey, my delivery's gone missing, or it's damaged in delivery, and it's genuine, and they need to obviously deal with that and refund it. But they also have examples where someone's taking the same object and claiming a refund for it multiple times, and they're in a relatively small fraud team trying to figure out and work out what's right and what's wrong is hard for them. And now they've got a semi-autonomous agent that is looking at all of these cases coming in and pattern matching across them, and they think they've saved millions and millions of pounds already in the time that agent's been in action. And it's now allowing their fraud team to be much more precise and action oriented in the interactions they have with their customers, supporting those that are genuine and actually then taking action against those that aren't. So that's just one very simple example there. It's so powerful, and I think that links back to a business problem that's saving that particular organization money. And in fact, if you're interested in reading more, there's a case study on our website and on YouTube about it. And so I think that would probably be a good example, Kaz, of like going from like where we are in season 2. Maybe season 2 goes on a few more years, I don't know. We won't try and define that, but I would say get hot on the business processes and think about how these agents can go help you that are powered by AI in the background.
Yeah,
I think I would say as well, just to that, the kind of softer side of it, away from kind of policy and everything, is giving people the space to be innovative. So we're trying to set particularly our development teams up so that they have the space in each sprint or in each kind of objective cycle to actually go away and come up with ideas, because often the people that are kind of reading about it in the evenings and are kind of evangelists are actually writing some of our features, and trying to give them the ability to take up some capacity in our development cycle to trial stuff out, run some spikes. And actually, we're already finding kind of ways to go faster and unlock new capabilities that in the past we would have been like, oh, that's actually a much bigger investment. We might have to wait to put that on our roadmap. So I think the idea of just the mentality switch and bringing it in, giving people the safety to be like, go and try this out, innovate, and don't worry if it fails, because we'll help guide you and support you on that. And I think that's something that we're really trying to embed in our day-to-day practices, so that we're not just saying, we're going to do some AI features this month. It's like, in everything we do, we're thinking like that, and we've got that hat on.
Final question for you, Frank, before I head over to our Q&A. Just make a quick call to action. So some questions have bubbled up throughout some of these. There's a question you wanted to ask that I haven't asked. You can use the Q&A portion to ask that question. There's a couple of questions in there already. I know we answered one of them earlier, but also seen a few published here that people are voting on. So really excited to get to those. Frank, just one final question for you around kind of weaving a new workplace when it comes to some of the like technology side of it. What's your view when it comes to not just storming ahead in the wrong direction, but shifting that to the right direction? You spoke a little bit about that earlier, but how do we prepare for season 3 or season 4? Yeah.
Well, before it gets cancelled as well.
Yeah. Well, season 2 of Breaking Bad, yeah, goes on forever.
Again, the key to it really is to ground it, particularly linking it to clients and customers, and your products and your services and your mission there. Because at the end of the day, all of us can map out loads of different uses for lots of different AI tools. Nick's highlighted about the power of agents, but we should really be super focused, because it can end up wasting time, money, energy, headspace by going in the wrong directions. And this is why we're trying to make sure that we work with our leaders to really hone in and streamline the layers of the work that we do, so that we can actually really hone in on where we place our bets effectively on the right things to incorporate AI tool usage. You got your front office with regards to the people in the front line working with customers, clients, candidates. Then also got your back office in terms of that operations side, supporting the front office. And then you got your enabling services such as HR, the comms, the legal, and they've all got their own use cases, but really making it super clear, linking it to customer at the heart of what you do, helps you to really make decisions in terms of where you place your bets. So I don't know whether that answers your...
Yeah, for sure. I think also being one of the tech companies in the room, I think it's important that we work well together to simplify that for end employees as well. I know bit of an exclusive today, but I know we're collaborating with Microsoft to basically expose and access some of the Unity content through Microsoft 365 Copilot. And I think that's the sort of innovation which will start to drive some of this forward. So things aren't just existing in isolation or in silos, but actually tech works together and based around the use cases. That's really exciting. So I'm looking forward to that. Hannah, coming from your working with the Microsoft team there. So super excited for that. Let's move over to our Q&A segment. So I've seen a couple of questions come in. I want to start with the one from Bryn. I'm probably going to come to you, Nick. I'll probably come to you on this one. How can organizations balance innovation with job security and ensure employees see AI as an enabler rather than a threat?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one that I'd say has come up pretty consistently over the last 2 years. But I think increasingly I'm hearing people say to me, I don't fear AI so much anymore, I fear people that know how to use it. And I think that brings us back to the conversation that we've been having really over the last 50 minutes or so, which is there are going to be early adopters in your organization that just get it and use it in their personal lives as well as at work. And for them, it feels very natural. And by the way, that is not, interestingly, that is not just Generation Z. When we did the research, we found it was cross-generational. It's more of a mindset, I think, that is causing some people to rush ahead and use it effectively. I'd say that's the curious and the creative minds that tend to want to go to the technology solution quickly, but in helping enable all users to be able to maximize the technology in their day-to-day. And when you do, I think that gives an element of security, because if you're left behind, that's where I think it gets more painful. And so I think that's probably the main thing that we can do that's within our control. The other things to think about is, how do you use the existing number of people to be able to do more stuff? Like, I've got plenty of examples in organizations that are very heavily driven by process, mundane process, that, let's just say it took a worker 2 hours to do this one job. Now they can do it in an hour, and they can therefore serve more customers or serve more scenarios. So I think there's a great opportunity to make organizations more efficient with the same number of people. And also get ahead and making sure that you're staying ahead of the technology trends and not waiting to be out competed by those around you. I'd say if you're lagging behind and you haven't got a plan for it, you don't have your principles, you're not thinking about how to innovate with it, then sadly, I do believe those around you that will outcompete. So they're just a few responses. It's a long, and maybe other thoughts from Frank and Hannah as well. It's a great question that you could end up spending an hour talking about, quite honestly.
Yeah, it's definitely deep, and definitely conversations that the business needs to have openly with its people. It's serious questions here, and it deserves serious answers. And also some of it as well is because it's elements of new ground. We don't really have direct answers. There's no blueprint to this. All of us are learning it as we go along. However, there is history with regards to just any technology that's ever come about in human history. Natural response is threat, and which is mostly because you're afraid of it, because you don't know enough about it. People owning it and wielding it aren't clear enough in their definition of what they're using it for and how it benefits you. And so it all comes down to your choice of narrative and really linking it, which is why I harp on about it. Design it to be human-centric, and then that should be your North Star with regards to everything that you talk about, you communicate about it, particularly if you want to balance that innovation side and job security side.
So talking of human-centric, one of the common themes that keeps coming up is, especially around the workforce's mindset, mentality, and that kind of links to our second question here from Kieran. How do you build an AI learning pathway into the skill set? Because I think there's the work the organization can do, but also I think we want to bring employees along that journey. We spoke about that earlier, Nick, but Frank, I want to come to you on this. What are you doing at Adecco Group, and what are your views on how you bring employees along on that journey?
Top secret, so we can't.
Okay.
Again, all of this is learning really, and what we're trying to do is work really closely with our learning development teams. We're trying to start at the basics, which is just trying to get the basic leveling up sorted out. Mm-hmm. However, we are looking into and trying to understand and map out a little bit clearer what are the competencies that we want people to have, particularly if you're in the know. So the teams who are in the know about AI at least have a better appreciation about the skills that you need and the knowledge that you need. So working with the right people with the right knowledge allows you to have these conversations to map out what the competencies look like. And then from there, you can do many various things to start to really expand what then the skills are related to those competencies. You can maybe link it with maybe personas or other ways of connecting it, so that you've got a bit more of a direction of travel of the design of the organization that you're trying to make, so that it has really strategic purpose behind it. Now, that's very wide and big and deep, but you need to bring the right players who have the skills and experience to actually restart and redo the curriculum, so to speak. Because Kieran's right, what are the learning pathways? And then really you want to associate that with roles, and then you want to associate that with your workflows, so that people can immediately see what I would want to do my skill development on because of my role and because of the work that I do. And this is all down to maturity, and we're all learning about our scaling of maturity.
And I think, Frank, just to add to that, you talked about storytelling earlier, and I think some of it is some people might not have the mindset that they don't want to use AI, but they just don't know how best to apply it to their role or how it could impact them. So I think taking those kind of day-to-day stories and actually mapping it to their personas, like you say, their roles, and bringing it to life, rather than it being this, oh, I can only use it to reword my email. But like Nick was saying, like maybe you want to build an agent to actually help you do other productivity tasks. And I think it's bringing it to life and humanizing it a little bit more than it just being this big scary thing. And people might not be afraid of using it, but they might just know how to apply it. And I think we're a little bit away from, that's maybe why there's a fast and a slow lane as well, not just attitude, but actually, oh no, like it's a bit of a minefield. No one knows where to start and how to apply it to their job.
Yeah, and you just have to look externally before. Sorry, Nick, I just cut you in there. But you just look at the major model companies who are out there, all the frontier guys. They're not really showing you decent work-related use cases. They're promoting ordering pizza, getting me a table reservation. None of it is really making it super relevant to people in terms of this workspace. And this is where we've got a duty of care, working with partners like Microsoft and others who can actually, who have that deep knowledge about all of the work that companies and enterprises do. And that's where I think there's a neat partnership to be had with different players like Microsoft.
Yeah, I was just going to build on your point, Frank and Hannah. First, actually, just as an instant response to your point there, we have a lot of success kits on our website that detail by role type, by industry, by persona, the types of scenarios in which AI can be helpful. So there's tons and tons of resources, and maybe Kaz, there's a way in which we can send some links out to that, because there's some really brilliant resources there. But the point I was just going to make as well is that we shouldn't underestimate what a seismic shift in technology this experience is for the end user. You could argue this is as big as the graphical user interface back in the early 90s, and getting used to that was significant, and then getting used to this type of technology is again very significant. So you shouldn't underestimate just how important a really thorough, robust change management program is in helping the end user to figure out this new way of operating. You've got to undo 20 years of using search engines and actually start having a conversation with generative AI in a way that gets the results that you need. So I think just valuing it and putting the legwork and the groundwork in now will pay dividends in years to come.
That's a perfect note to end on, and I think there's been lots of food for thought, but also lots of discussion around action. Nick, I can definitely collate those links and send them out in a post-event email. I'll also send some of the other links we referenced, like the research. For those of you that want to get hands-on with the Unily product, whether you're a customer or you're just interested to see how AI works within Unily, we've got this kind of walkthrough experience where you can see AI in action on the Unily product on our website. So you can do that. Also, we have if you want a big part of this is the conversation. We've had some of that conversation today, but no doubt you'll want to have some of that conversation with industry peers. The likes of the people on this panel will be there, but also people in your industry, other peers that are in role in organizations with the same challenge. And we have our Employee Experience Conference in Nashville this year, October 7th and 8th. So save those dates to continue the conversation. And that brings me to a nice close, perfectly on the hour. Thank you so much to all of my panelists. Great discussion. Lots of practical tips as well that people can go away and think about. Look out for your post-event email where you'll have some of the key links that we've discussed. And thank you so much for attending, seeing lots of love come through. Thank you so much for attending. Thanks to the panelists.
Thank
Thanks,
you all.
everyone.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.